The Department of Basic Education has published the Basic Education Law Amendment Bill. Among others, the bill aims to ensure that governing bodies guard against unfair discrimination in respect of the official languages that are offered as subject options. It also seeks to make attendance compulsory from grade R, and those guilty of blocking a child from attending school without a just cause could be fined or imprisoned. For more on this, I'm joined now by education expert Professor Mary Metcalf, as well as education activist Hendrik Makeneta. Good evening, and thank you for your time tonight joining us here on In Focus. What is most significant for you, Professor Metcalf, around the proposed changes?
You know, this is a very comprehensive update of the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act. It was last created in 2011 after the Department of Education was split into the Department of Higher Education and Training and the Department of Basic Education. So in 2011, after the departments were split, the legal need to create a separate act was created, and now we have BELA. So 10 years later, there is such a comprehensive list of changes that we need to look at. What you've highlighted is issues to do with language, issues to do with making it well, it makes it actually a criminal offense for anyone to disrupt schooling. But there is so much here. It outlaws corporal punishment in hostels. It makes sure that at provincial and national level there's coordinating structures across departments in respect of education. It makes it the responsibility of provincial and national departments to have a structure which links to all of the other departments. It strengthens the response of the departments to attendance. Where we have learners who are not attending school, it makes the department responsible to follow up, which is very necessary. There's a great deal in this bill which the public should be looking at and the public should be responding to in the public process led by Parliament.
Yeah. Then Makeneta, the minister is saying there's more to this particular a bill, for example, to hold principals, to hold parents, and to hold governing bodies accountable for that issue that Professor Metcalf is raising for non-attendance. Is this the kind of instrument that we need? I mean, stricter laws in place to deal, for example, with all the ills that we are dealing with in our education system?
Definitely, Thabo. I think that this is the most progressive bill that Parliament must debate at some point. And you are right, the Minister has collaborated with a wide range of stakeholders to ensure that a wide range of amendments are made, as Professor Mary Metcalf has just said. And of importance, what you have just raised now is Section 4A. That seeks to hold managers accountable, particularly for the punctual and regular attendance of learners, with a view to reduce or rather to get rid of the dropout rates. You'll recall that COVID-19 caught all of us unprepared, and the dropout rates have also increased. And now this bill, once it is adopted into law, will make sure that if a learner is not at school for a period of 3 days, the principal has got a duty to ensure that he or she communicates with parents within 24 hours to find out what is happening basically to the learner. But at the same time, this bill is going to ensure that school attendance is compulsory from grade R and no longer from grade 1, as it is currently the case. Meaning that, in terms of the national curriculum statement, grade R will also form part and parcel of the core business of schooling. So that if a learner is found not at school, whether they are in grade R or going forward, as you have correctly indicated, parents can be held liable up to an imprisonment of up to 12 months in prison if there is no just cause, or if they cannot explain in such a way that there is a just cause for the child not to be in school.
I'm going to come back to, I've got a very interesting one for you as an activist yourself. But Professor Metcalf, I've heard you articulate this in various platforms, your analysis of the dropout problem and why we are seeing close to like at least 50% of those who enroll completing school. Does this bill touch on those issues, particularly that you raise in your analysis on why we have such a huge dropout problem?
Thabo, I do want to respond to that because that's one of the areas where I hope that the bill is going to be strengthened through public participation. But I just want to say, in terms of compulsory attendance from grade R, I had to go back and read that quite carefully because it's not making it compulsory. It's saying that admission to grade R is from grade 4, turning 5. But if there's a shortage of space, children of compulsory age must be given priority. So I understand where that comes from in terms of my colleague's comment, but it isn't compulsory from grade 4, from the age of 4. What I want to say about the dropout is that this provision in the bill doesn't go far enough, because it says that if a learner's been absent for 3 days consecutively, the principal must act. Well, that's good, but it's not enough. All schools have the SASAMS, the South African School Administration Management System, which enables them to monitor attendance over a long period of time. Now, dropout doesn't happen suddenly. Dropout happens because learners become disengaged from school, and that means sporadic attendance. It means you might miss a day every week, you might miss 2 days here, 3 days there, and it's the pattern of non-attendance that we really need government to support schools to react to, because the dropout, as Hendrik has said, is a major problem. We cannot have the loss of learners that we've been experiencing before COVID and that has been exacerbated by COVID. So I'm hoping in the public participation process that, yes, 3 days, but can we also look at patterns of non-attendance, because it's the patterns of disengagement that result in dropout.
Is there a connection between patterns of disengagement and the poor or weak culture of teaching in our schools?
I would say that learners who are not being engaged in terms of being cognitively, emotionally learning in learning terms, feeling that they have a place in school, that then would contribute to dropout. Poor achievement contributes to dropout. And of course, there's a whole lot of factors outside of school that impact on it. The culture of teaching and learning, I'm not certain that we could generalize and say that in all schools that's the case. I continue to believe that in the majority of schools we have teachers and principals who are working incredibly hard under difficult conditions to support learners. That's why they're there.
Yeah. Hendrik, the bill also proposes to make it an offense, and I thought this was very, very interesting, for any person who willfully interrupts or disrupts any school activity or willfully hinders or obstructs any school in the performance of its school activities. From an activist point of view, student movements, this would probably be a very difficult part of the bill to deal with, because student movements, for example, use that particular avenue to make their grievances heard.
Well, I think the National Assembly, in its wisdom, will have to look at all of these factors, such as the student movement, as you have just said. It is true that the Congress of South African Students, the Congress of South African Students, as well as any other student organizations, do have a right to organize within the terrain of education. And I don't think that there will be any contradiction as such, because they are stakeholders, just like the South African Democratic Teachers Union, as well as other unions. They too can engage in, activities that can disrupt school from time to time. But applications are made in such cases, just like when people go on strike in the streets of Pretoria, where they can disrupt businesses or operations. Streets are closed from time to time. I think that the National Assembly can be able to deal with that. But what is very key for me, what stands out as far as this bill is concerned, is also the fact that for the first time, we will see the South African Sign Language being, introduced as part and parcel of, equal to all the official languages, as long as it is used for learning and teaching. But again, if you look at the school governing bodies, from time to time, there's been this issue of a language where the SGBs would have sufficient power to come up with a language policy at the school. And if you look at the case of the World School MLO, where the school took government to court, it is very clear that the SGBs can also not have sufficient power. They don't have absolute power as such. The head of department is the one who is going to ultimately have a say in relation to the development of languages. And I think that is a victory for communities in our country, because that too has been a bone of contention for a while. And of course, SGBs can always collaborate with the MEC if they are not happy with the dictates of the HOD. So this bill, in my view, is quite progressive, and I think that it should be supported by all of us in society, including activists, as well as society generally.
Yeah, you've highlighted the amendment of Section 19 of the SACE Act, and you're saying that is quite a significant move. Why does that stand out for you?
Well, if you look at SACE currently, it does not have the full capacity to train, some of the teachers. If you look at other areas, such as different companies, you do find that there are internships and so on. But when it comes to teaching, teachers go for training in various universities, and at some point they come back and just look for jobs on their own. But I think SACE as well will have the capacity to develop teachers from time to time, in terms of the necessary funding that will be required, if employers are able to provide that. So SACE will also play a very crucial role in relation to the development of teachers.
Let's take a break. We'll come back and wrap up the conversation. We asked that very important question: will the amendments advance change, or is this just another legislative exercise? We'll get reaction from Professor Mary Metcalf, as well as education activist Hendrik Makeneta. Next, stay with us. Conversation with Professor Mary Metcalf, as well as education activist Hendrik Makeneta. We're talking about the amendment to the Education Act that is being proposed. Stricter laws that will ensure that there is, that it seeks to say there'll be access, there'll be success, but also there'll be diversity, and this would be able to be sustainable. But is this just another legislative exercise, Professor Metcalf? I mean, firstly, does it guarantee access? That's one. And then, of course, we've also spoken at length about the guarantee of success in the education system. But then, of course, of late, we've been seeing a lot of questions that have been arising around the diversity within our education system as well.
Well, all legislation does require that it needs to be implemented by the responsible officials. In the case of this act, the responsible officials are all over the country. It's all principals, it's school governing bodies, it's teachers, and it's making very significant contributions, for example, to the issue of conflict of interests or at worst, corruption in the procurement practices of school governing bodies, it makes it very clear that there cannot be undeclared conflict of interests. That has to be implemented in order for the Act, when it's passed by Parliament, to be real. It has to be implemented conscientiously by the principal, by the school governing bodies, monitored by the district officials. There's parts of the bill which, for example, I would feel very strongly about, such as banning corporal punishment in hostels, which again makes it incumbent upon the staff in the hostels, the principal responsible for the hostels, as well as again for the district officials to monitor. The reason why public participation is so important is because it's the public who need to make sure that the aspirations of the bill are achieved through their participation in schools. And it's very important for activists such as Hendrik and organizations such as Equal Education and others to all be vigilant to say this is the law that has been put into Parliament as a bill after thorough consultation. It's been passed by Parliament by our elected representatives, and we are going to be the ones that are going to monitor the successful implementation of that bill.
Yeah. Hendrik, not my words, it's Cabinet's words, at least via the Minister and the President, is saying the amendments, among others, give effect to universal access to 2 years of early childhood development. Is this enforceable?
Yes, definitely it is enforceable because most of the aspects that are presented in the bill are in line with the Constitution of the Republic. You will recall that the Constitution of the Republic is the supreme law of the country, and that any law or conduct that is inconsistent with the Constitution shall be invalid. Therefore, this bill will stand the test of time. I think that once the National Assembly, along with the National Council of Provinces, have adopted this bill, the President will gladly welcome the move and sign it into law. And there is no doubt that it is very much consistent with the Constitution of the Republic, something that is a very good thing for all South Africans.
Yeah. Now, the question you've already mentioned of the penalty that could go all the way up till 12 months, there are some who are suggesting that maybe we should increase that penalty to 6 years, where parents are preventing learners from getting education. How far do you think that debate is going to go?
Well, I think we need to be reasonable as well as society, that government as well, Parliament, but in this case the judiciary, has got various penalties that they give out for a wide range of offences. And I think that in my view, 6 months up to 12 months is a reasonable amount of time that any person should serve for violating the rights of the learners, for preventing learners from learning. I don't think that 6 years is reasonable in my view, but perhaps Prof can also chip in on that regard.
Yeah, indeed, Prof. And I'm sure this will be part of the public consultation process as well. But there are those who are calling for harsher penalties. I mean, there are various socioeconomic considerations here that would lead parents to not want their kids to go to school. A 6-year punishment.
Look, the bill makes adequate provision and builds on previous legislation in terms of homeschooling. And the compulsory age of schooling for South African children remains that it is compulsory to be in school from the year in which you turn 7 until either the end of grade 9 or the age of 16. Now, that is in the public interest for learners to be at school in that age group. And a person who chooses not to homeschool and chooses not to let their child attend school is not acting in public interest or in the interests of their child. I want to just quickly comment a little bit more about the grade R. What we're having at the moment, and it's a massive undertaking, is the transition of early childhood development responsibilities from the Department of Social Development to Education. And we need to understand that as being up until the age of 7. And grade R is a kind of transition year between ECD and formal schooling. Now, we must not think that that early childhood development is necessarily going to all happen at school. Much of it is community-based. And again, I've just double-checked, is that what the draft legislation says is the admission age of a learner to a public school to grade R is aged 4, that's the admission age, turning 5 by 30th of June, provided that if a school has limited capacity for admission in grade R, preference must be given to learners who are subject to compulsory attendance. So the compulsory attendance, and Hendrik and I might want to keep on debating this, and both of us have gone through this very complex bill only today, but my understanding is that the compulsory age remains. There's good social and individual reasons for that. Grade R, you may admit children from when they're 4 years old, if they're 5, by the 30th of June. But let's not assume that all ECD is going to be happening formally in schools. This is a massive project, important for building foundations in our country. Much of it is in community, and we need to support community-based ECD as well as the more formal ECD that starts in the DBE system from grade R, where there is room for learners.
Yeah, you can weigh in there, Hendrik. I mean, that compulsory age, of course, going to be a question that will have to also be ventilated broadly as far as the public consultations are concerned.
Definitely. I think clarity must be provided. I think it will all fall out or fall into place as and when the public consultation continues. But of course, I fully agree with Prof. The age at grade R level is very much critical so that we do not find ourselves wanting. There must be a very clear definition of the age. The age factor must kick in to say the child must either be 5 or 6. But I think 7, of course, it's quite a number. At 7, well, most of the learners start grade 1 already. And so I don't know, but debates will have to unfold because if you look at grade RR and R, most of them started at 4 years old and 5. And by the time the learner reaches 7 years, they are already starting at grade 1 level. So that is another issue that is debatable.
The question of equality, of course, has been pronounced quite strongly during this time of the pandemic, where certain schools were able to access, for example, in-person learning, even throughout the pandemic, because they just had the space. Even those who shifted and were able to go online, they were able to do so without skipping a beat. But, of course, we know that the majority of our schools have not been able to do that. I don't know whether that is something that could be fixed via legislation. Prof?
I don't think that we can fix equality through legislation. Equality has to do with how we allocate resources on the basis of constitutional principles and on the basis of legislation. The reality that families have different disposable incomes, that families have different resources to support learning at home, different resources to support the child at school, is a reality that we need as South Africans all to understand and be committed to combating the inequality that so undermines many of our children's opportunities to learn. when we talk about access, for example, to digital technology, we are far away from that being real in the lives of the majority of our learners. I would love to see it happening, but there will be a whole lot that needs to be done in the ecosystem of making that available. That will need to be addressed. More people, more learners need their own devices. We need access to Wi-Fi. We need cheap and affordable internet access. And that is something that we need a comprehensive plan on going forward. And we need to learn from where success is being achieved in poor communities.
Yeah. Hendrik, I mean, transformation, non-negotiable in all aspects, in all sectors of society, particularly in education. If we look at the unemployment numbers in the country, education and skills, quite key to be able to pull us through out of that dire situation. But, of course, equality would have to be made paramount here. A couple of amendments to the legislation certainly will not do that, but we need to at least start here and go a little bit further.
Definitely, Thabo. Inequality, not only inequality, but also poverty, along with unemployment, remain the three biggest challenges that face our country until today. And unless we do something drastic to reduce poverty, unemployment, and inequality, we will not be able to get our learners into the, to bridge the digital divide. But at the same time, I've always been of the view that government alone on its own is already unable to resolve these issues of, defeating poverty, unemployment, and inequality. The private sector, much as they are also going through a difficult time due to COVID-19, they too must find a way to come on board and try and assist in the eradication of poverty in our communities so that we can help our learners to create a better future for themselves.
Professor Mehmet Kalf and Hendrik Makinet, I appreciate your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus and, of course, helping us through quite a lot there that would still need to be ironed out as far as this bill is concerned. And, of course, that public consultation process, which you're highly encouraged to participate in as soon as that detail is made available to you. We continue